And welcome. Welcome to 360 Yield Center. What a pleasure to have you here tonight. And for those of you that are still in the other room grabbing food, just load your plates and make your way in, and we'll get started here. But we're excited that you're here. We had a tremendous night last night, and true to form, whenever we have a meeting, it snows, but it was manageable. So I don't think it was too bad for anybody heading home. But we're excited you're here. You know, 360 Yield Center is a company made up of farmers, agronomists, and engineers. And we're a nitrogen company. And I was telling some that were here visiting here earlier, I get pretty excited. I get kind of jacked up at times, and you kind of knew that over the years on planters. I was really focused on planters, but in all those years, I don't know if I've ever seen the kind of response that we're discovering of technology and nitrogen that we have to show you, where we can actually take a hold of the long lever and we can move the dial. And so that's the things we're going to talk about tonight. I'm honored when I look across to see how many young growers we have in our group. But last night I had a gentleman here. He was sitting right here where you are, only foot further back maybe, but I love you guys up close. He's from Delaware, 76 years age, and he said, Greg, I'm on my 43rd crop, and I've never been more excited. And he said, I literally cannot wait to plant corn this spring. Isn't that something? Because you think about life, and we have what, 50 tries to swing the bat at the ball? You know, in engineering, we might do something 1,000 times in 2 days. You see our 3D printers, I mean, I can reproduce parts every 24 hours. I can make ripper points, and everybody said it'll never happen, but we could print a ripper point and pull it for a little bit in the ground just to see effects. And so you're just amazing what technology does. But in farming, we wait, don't we? And so we try, and then we wait till the next year and we try again. So I'm really excited that the opportunity that we have. Some would consider this to be a challenge. And we can see the 10-year price of grain. And we're not going to dwell on it, because I've learned a long time ago, you and I can't really do anything about it. That's a longer lever than you and I can push. But it's what you and I do with it that counts. Are you willing to change? Because in a $7 corn market, over all the years that I've dealt with you, I've watched it. In a $7.50 corn market, it's hard to get you to change a systems approach because things are pretty good. But we get in a $3.45 corn market, and all of a sudden we're forced to change, aren't we? And it depends how we're made and created. But I want to tell you this. You're here for a reason tonight. The good Lord has made you a farmer for a reason. Yes, it's to feed your family, without question. That's first and above all. But it's also to feed the world. And so we can talk about what challenges we have, and you can see here what impact seed and fertilizer, and you can see the increase, and you notice as the grain prices went down, they haven't. And so it gets to be more and more of the cost of an acre of inputs. But when you leave here tonight, I hope that in our discussion together, that we come to a point where we can start to manage inputs very carefully and actually raise yields by doing that. And so the challenge here tonight is get back to farming. What do I mean by that? It's where you and I go back in the field. And you've heard me say it time after time. Listen to your corn. Do we understand what the corns tell us when we walk in there? We've had some tremendous years, but now it's time to go back in and to start to really fine-tune our system. You could be here. We encompass. So we have South Africa and Australia in our crowd tonight, and we probably have at least, 14 to 17 states here. So we encompass every farming system known. The 76-year-old farmer from Delaware said, Greg, I've done cover crops for 28 years running. And when I come out here, I just have a heart attack when I see a bare tillage field. And I understand that, but he has to realize it's just completely different. Last night we had northern Michigan corn growers sitting here saying, we can't manage residue because when we start harvest, it's already 28 degrees. And so you got to realize that all of us have different challenges. But at the same time, there's answers. And so as we get back to farming, it's understanding. In years past, we maybe have laid all of our inputs. We've laid all $500-600 down at one time. We've just laid it out there and said, here we go. And the challenge I want to put to you is, I'm going to ask you to start to hang on to it, and we lay it down carefully with thought and design each $100 that we're going to invest. And we calculate it and say, is there some way that we know exactly what we're going to get back for the $100 that we're laying down on the table? Let me give you an example. I've farmed this farm for over 20 years. It's a 450-acre farm, and it's owned by a family that's not involved in agriculture in any way. In fact, they don't even get along as a family, but they want high returns. And so it's been a challenge for us, and I enjoy it. And I put a lot into this farm, and so I had an opportunity this year to walk away from it because it was pretty unreasonable rates. And they don't understand that we're in a $3.50 corn market. They just want a lot of rent. And so Aaron and I have been working on this concept of just laying down a little bit of money at a time. And so we went out and we said, look, seed is just getting ridiculous. I mean, my best numbers are running per acre after discounts. We're at $145 per acre in dollars. So they obviously didn't get the message that corn went to $3.50, Monsanto and Pioneer. But we said, what if, and not on all of our farms, but what if on this farm where we really need to get back to farming, we would put it in conventional corn. And so this corn up here, you can see, you can tell they're kissing cousins. So 6205 here that you see is really 6208, only this is a conventional. 6295 is really 6297. And then this Pioneer number here that you can see. But at the same time, by really focusing on every detail, walking in the corn every week, doing the rootworm larva floats, looking for corn borer, watching every disease, managing it to the hilt, where we really got back to farming, we were still able to produce 254 bushel average on that farm. And the seed cost me $74 an acre, which then gave me, just on the seeding alone, $71 to start to play with, so that I can go back to a family that's not being reasonable and say, well, before I just give up the 450 acres, maybe I'll play a little bit with this. And see, so we start to strip nutrient program, start to put more things on the planter, realizing that if we're going to do this kind of conventional, then you're going to have to understand this planter is going to have liquid insecticide. So in here, we're putting starter here, right through the Ketons, about 3.7 gallon. We got about 9 ounces of force in there. And so we're going to aggressively watch this and make sure that we got ourselves, you can see we're doing corn on beans. This is not corn on corn. And at the same time, we're going to be in here and we're going to be checking all the way along. And we're watching this corn close. Are we going to have any kind of silk feeding? Are we going to be paying attention to disease that comes in? Realizing the minute we get corn that's stressed, bad things start to happen. You've heard us say it how many times? Corn can never have a bad day. That's why I got so nervous in the local area. When I saw knee-high corn turning yellow, I was like, is anybody paying attention? This is not when you want to have corn turn yellow when it's knee-high. And so we'll talk about it here in a bit. And so you're in there and you're looking, what? We're looking at a lower leaf. And we're taking all the leaves below the ear leaf. The ear leaf is your golden ticket. This guy here, you cannot let get hammered on. It's all about photosynthesis. Remember, you're not farmers. You just don't raise corn. You harvest sunlight. Whether you're in wheat, soybeans, cotton, corn, you do nothing more than manage sunlight. That's how you got to start thinking this whole year. How do I manage sunlight? How do I manage sunlight? How do I get more sunlight? How do I put more plants out, capture more sunlight, never let it hit the ground? That's the name of the game. So in this case, if you're telling me this is an ear leaf and you see this many lesions on it, bad day, you should be able to stack up all those lesions on a quarter. And if they don't fit on a quarter, it's time to get aggressive management on plant health because there's big returns to you. And so the worst thing you can do in 345, 350 corn market is say, well, I'll tell you one thing. I'm going to keep my money in my pocket. I'm going to just forget about fungicide management. I'm just not going to spray this year because it's just not in the budget. Be careful. The answer to low corn prices is high yields. And so for you and I and an individual, not for the whole country. And so let's talk a little bit about plant health. Well, that's the reality. Okay, so there's 500 of us here. If we all went to 300 bushel, I don't think we're going to change the overall for the United States. But it could be really good for 500 of us, couldn't it? Yeah. We'd, we're really all on the same side. Maybe we do farm next to each other. But at the end of the day, it's about yield. And it's about, the amazing thing, that 76-year-old guy, guess who his neighbor is? Dave Hula, who raised 532. Love that guy or not? Isn't he amazing? Same stinking hybrids I plant, went 254. He went 532, so we're halfway there. So you just got to love those guys that are out there working hard at it. Of course, he doesn't put his nitrogen on once and done. Just give you a little tip. They manage it pretty tight. So this is kind of technology we're offering where we're saying, what if on those leaves that we see those lesions, what if we could spray from the bottom and the top on them? And we start to get extremely good coverage. Can we start to change it? And so it's called undercover. And you can see it here on the sprayers. And it has 4 nozzles. In this case, there's 3 of them here working active. And you can see they're spraying up and they're spraying to the side. And you go in, and we're going to start to get more money. So if we're going to lay down some dollars and go after plant health, then by golly, let's get the best position to get the most bang for the buck. And so for years, and I have nothing against this guy. I have a lot of respect for him. I'm not jealous. I wouldn't fly that for anything. I wouldn't ride with him. I was watching him here. We got trees on both ends here. Home place is just across the river. He's flying 120 mile an hour, and I mean, he's moving quick. But at the same time, this is V7 corn. This is Preaxar. We're coming in. We're doing some studies of undercover earlier fungicide. Interesting studies. As BASF and those are coming. You're going to see a trend here in the next 2 to 3 years. There's a lot of large companies jumping in on some really neat technology coming out for us to go after this plant health thing. Preaxar is one of them. It can go on much earlier than, you don't have to be brown silk. And so we saw some pretty interesting things with it. At the same time, we went out and we said, okay, let's put the litmus paper on the top. And obviously you can see there's one here on the bottom. And so this right here was what it looked like with undercover on the top. This was a plane on the 7th node, and you can see it here. And then we went and we look at the bottom side. This is undercover from the bottom, and yes, as you can see here in the front, we didn't get anything on from the bottom side of the leaf where all the spore openings are. And so all of a sudden it just becomes common sense. And over the years, when we worked in planters, the simpler the product that we invented, it was easier to be accepted. Because it just, people would walk up and they look and say, oh man, I could have thought of that. I said, yeah, but you didn't, That's what Deere said. Well, I won't say that. I got carried away, Tim. I was going to tell a story, but I caught myself just in time. Thank you for helping me. And it's just, as farmers, it's common sense. We say, well, why wouldn't we want to spray it from the bottom like this on every leaf? And so those are things that are out there. And then you can see the untreated strip, and this is Preaxar trial. You can see the untreated, and you can see the treated. So it shouldn't be amazement to you as a professional corn grower that the right side of the screen yielded more. You say, well, yeah, I get it. So if you're going to lay down the pocket change, then let's cash out, and let's get the most bang for the buck we can. Let's take a look at it. So here's Winfield, great company. We worked close with them, and they did lots and lots of plots. And you can see here all the different cities in Minnesota, Nebraska, and Iowa, and Wisconsin. And then they took an average here. And basically what they're saying, this is the check, and they come in with a sprayer, high boy sprayer of top boom spraying down. This is not an airplane. And they saw an 8 bushel advantage over these two. And then they said by just adding under the leaf, they added another 3.5 bushel. And all of a sudden your light bulbs start to come on. You say, wow, this is something that can make quite a difference. Look at this third-party data here. So they saw an 8.2 bushel difference from a turbo T-jet over the top to just putting nozzles where we come underneath. And so there's some pretty big, good yields here. 195 without foliar. This is headline amp at BT. You know, you'll have to admit that's not a bad yield. There's a lot of us that say 195 bushel corn in a tough year last year. I'll take it. And then you see how they jumped it up to what? 15 bushel more here by coming in and spraying a fungicide over the top. And then they jumped it again another 8.2 by coming and saying, let's think about this different. Let's take a look at it. So these are exciting things that we're talking about, saying if we're going to go out, then let's position it the best way that we possibly can. Soybeans. Interesting, the kind of response we've been seeing in soybeans. This is actually Jim Hedges here in his beans. And so he's in here putting a fungicide on and working with it. And you're going to see this is not the exact picture that went with the plot. But here's a plot here where they had insecticide and fungicide at R2. And you can see here, this is a lot of bushel beans. They were looking at what, almost 8 point something? 8 point different bushel. And so it starts to open up our thought process, and we start to say, wait a minute. If we're going to put these good genetics out, is there going to be a response if we would come in either at that R1, R2, R3, and some of you are even starting to look at putting on some nitrogen at that step. There's some really interesting data out there. Now remember, nitrogen is going to make beans lazy, so you got to be careful when you do it. You do it too early, and you'll really lazy those guys out. So you want to make them work hard for you. And then there's a certain time where you come in, if you do it early enough, you could really hang on to some extra pods. And that's some of the things that are happening. BASF, good little company. We've had a lot of fun working with them. This is a headline AMP trial. And you look at this, and you start to see in the bottom here is where they did all their fungicide trials. And you see in the top, this was the untreated. Then you see over in this edge of the field, where they put these plants under stretch, they ran out of nitrogen. And so all of a sudden, it starts to, when I told you in the neighborhood, I was getting nervous driving by fields that were yellowing out. By the time they were in the V6, hip high, V7, V8 pocket high, there was quite a bit of coloration change. And you stress corn at that, and then you come out and you say, you know what, I'm sorry, wrong button. I think I'm going to put this fungicide on. All they're saying here is if corn's not at its peak and you don't have happy corn, you come out here, you're probably not going to see that 11.5 to 25 bushel response that you and I are going for. And so first we're going to fix the nutrient side. And we're going to pay attention to what's happening in that cornfield each and every day. And those are things that we're going to talk about and say, what's it going to take? Excuse me. So, this is a picture that all of us have seen before, isn't it? This is a common view all over the United States. And you see this kind of nitrogen deficiency, and you can say, well, Greg, you realize we had 2 years of rain in 2 months. I realize that. I'll be the first to raise my hand. At the dairy there, we were pounded. And we literally had 2 years of rain in 2 months. And so that put this in a very precarious position, don't we? But you get to the point when you see this kind of crop talking to us, and if we're listening here, the difference between this green area and this yellow area is probably going to be about 45 to 50 bushel. And so as a grower, and I don't see right at this moment, I don't see anybody on the road. I don't see in a tank here parked, and we're going to do an application. I'm startled, and I'm like, okay, what are we thinking? What are we going to do here? Because we cannot accept this. This has nothing to do with $7 corn, $3.50 corn, $2 corn. This is where you and I, as managers, have had to jump in. We got to say, we have to get active, and we've got to change it. So let's talk about it. Nature. Amazing, isn't it? You look at the data from weather research, and the storms are getting heavier and more vast amounts of rains every time they come through. And you can see here in this photo, we're about to get what? Pick a number. 1.5 inches, 3 inches, 3.5 out of this. Don't know, it's not here yet, but you can see the lightning. But you shouldn't have to use your imagination. You can see it's coming. And this corn today looks pretty good. And so you can say, well, you know, Greg, I got it all on. It just seemed like last fall, that was the best time to do that. And so I put it all down. He laid all of his money down in one pile, and the grower said, it's all on. And then nature starts to beat on us. What I want you to remember tonight is we don't have to accept those kind of losses anymore. We need to put ourselves in a position as a professional corn grower. So whether you're in this room and you're 16 years of age or you're 88 years of age, I don't care. Put yourself in a position to have success. And by that I mean position yourself so whether nature hammers on you and beats you up or it gifts you. This microbial here, this is Mike. See my old buddy Mike in here? And you got to get excited when you realize how God created nature where you have microbials that can hand you cash. How much? A lot of you are farming some decent soils. Nature can give you back. Mike and his team, all those healthy critters can hand you 100 pounds of free nitrogen. 80 to 100 is not out of reach. And at 50 cents a unit, nature just gave you $50 an acre back. So we throw that back onto our saving pile down here. And so I'm at the point I'm going to say, right now, I do not know. So if you told me you went out and it was November 1st, and I have a hard time relating. We speak different languages because I'll never understand the guy that said, I went out and put 225 pounds on, I checked the box, I'm good to go, and I believe that I'm going to make, and let's pick a date, October 1st. I believe I'm going to make it, Greg. In some way, just in the tea leaves or whatever, I believe this is the perfect amount. And I'm like, really? How do you know that? Well, it's worked for years. That's just the way we do it. And the statistics show it. 80% of the corn growers in the United States are once and done. 20% of us split applied nitrogen. 80%. And so what's the reaction from the rest of the world? Well, they started to get together and they're writing handbooks. It's called nitrogen management programs. And the state of Illinois passed it, and Iowa passed it. And then they got crazy, and then Des Moines sued the farmers north of Des Moines. And what should have happened? Immediately, the farmers south of Des Moines should have sued Des Moines. Because they take out and strip all the nitrogen out of all their waste and nitrates, and they strip it all out and charge everybody that lives in Des Moines for that. And then what do? They dump it back in the river. And we sit here and we accept that, but we understand the day is coming when this isn't going to fly anymore because it makes no sense. You're not giving Mike any credit if he does, and if he doesn't, we're all right because we're going to show you some techniques of what can happen. So let's talk about it. So as we talk about today's hybrids, and they've changed, I see some really good seedsmen in the crowd. I won't call them out, but Don's over here, I can see him. Don sold Pioneer corn for a long time. I'm not going to say his whole life. But what are we seeing in the newest genetics? They are what? They're higher yielding, no question. But when do they like their nitrogen? Late. They're aggressive feeders from about a week before pollination and into ear fill and kernel set. They're aggressively users of N. So Fred Belo went out and he researched a lot of genetics, and this is his curve. The Nike swoosh, and you can see it here. And what's he really saying? He says when corn gets as high as Gregg, it starts to use nitrogen. 3/4 of its total needs are after corn's head tall. And when you see somebody putting on nitrogen last November, and you realize how long we have to travel through time, 8 months. Not that it's bad to put in hydrogen. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying don't put all your bullets into one target. So this is what we look at. And we're going to talk about base rate. And we're going to talk about putting enough on that we could go past the V10. So what you see here in this curve right here is the V10, the V10 line's right here. That's when she really starts to ramp up. And so you're going to go out and you're going to put a base on. Pick a number. If you're going to do corn on corn, you're going to be over 100. If it's corn on beans, you might be in that 85 to 100. Maybe you want to be 125 or 150. Pick your number. But you're going to put it on so that you more than get yourself to where corn is going to start to utilize it. And then you're going to have enough. And then we're going to come in and start to do what? We're going to start talking about monitoring and measuring. And so this is a concept that's going to let you start to become profitable in whatever year you're in, whatever Chicago Board of Trade wants to pay you for your grain, wherever you are, your basis. Last night, the growers from North Dakota was saying they're sitting at about the 278 to 280 mark. And they're still planting corn. But they're extremely focused. They're living on the razor edge. That's where I want to live. I want to live on a razor blade of never running out, but never putting on more than I need of any requirement. And so let's get into it. We'll pick on John here just a bit. John Larkin, a very good friend of mine, works with me close. John's put out some studies of anhydrous for us. He went in November 10th, and he had, of course, stabilizers in it, and he put on 150 pounds in strips. And November 10th, it was warm. It had cooled down a little bit, but then it started to get warm. In December here, in the Tremont Morton area, we broke all-time records. I believe we got to 73 in December. Well, I know we had some days of 71, and it rained a lot. It rained a lot. And so the million-dollar question always was in the area, so everybody that had their fall anhydrous on, what happened? Where are we at? Well, you don't know unless you go out and measure. You could guess. So we went out to John's field, and we pulled. So right here's the shanks. They're 30 inches apart. And you can see here the red is ammonium. And you'd expect that to be really high in the shank mark. And then you can see, there's very little ammonium, but what you naturally would have in soil. But the interesting thing is when you look here at the black bar. What's the black bar telling us? It's telling that Mike came awake. Mike come out of hibernation. He woke up and he said, it's so nice out, I think I'll start to convert. And he did, even with a stabilizer on. And so at the end of the day, I'll just cut it real short. John basically has at risk at this moment 40 pounds of nitrogen is in the nitrate form. And so it's just the facts. It's what happened. Is John in a bad spot? No, because this is just his base. He's going to have a lot of opportunity to catch up with that field when he needs it. So he still has 110 pounds there. He'll go in and plant, and he'll be in a good spot. But the key is this. You have to know. And believe me, I've worked with the models. We had a model, and we pulled back because I started to look at it really from your eyes and saying, okay, if I'm going to buy this model per acre, how do I know the information's right? And I'm not picking on any models here. Climate and Circa, we had Commander. But at the end of the day, you have to know what the corn plant sees. And this is a soil scan. You can see it over here in the gator. You can see them positioned around the room. We are running soils for you. This is technology that sees what the corn plant sees at this very moment. I don't know how many of you pulled in the parking lot here with less than 1/8 of a tank of fuel, because maybe you come quite a ways. First thing you're going to do in the morning, if you leave the motel, you're going to find a fuel station, you're going to fuel up that truck. And you're going to put that gauge back on the other side. This is simply knowing where the gauge is in the North 80. Are you out or not? Because if you're telling me you're about on E in your field, And let's just pick on less than knee-high corn. Let's just say it's V6. What's happening at V6? Corn has to be extremely happy. I mean, huge smile. Because it's doing what? It's deciding today, how many rows around am I going to be? So when I drove by fields that were starting to yellow out at knee-high, I started to cringe because I realized it wanted to be 18, but it wasn't going to be 18. It probably ended up more in the 14 range. Painful. Every row is worth what to you? 10 bushel. If you tell me you go out, and you better know, go out and pull her down and take a look, and if you see it was 18 for the first inch and then went to 16, 20 bushel times $4, $80 an acre that you threw out into the wind. All because we let corn run the gauge too low. And so it's about understanding exactly where it's at. Soil scan lets you know if in 4 minutes, real time, today, exactly where we're at. Are we good or are we not? And so you can put 2 tablespoons of soil in here. It's going to mix this up. You're going to put it over in here and you're going to read nitrates. It's going to show it right on your iPad. The bags that you collect on the field have a QR code. You can take it, hold it up to your iPad or scan it, and you know exactly when you put it in your phone. It's called Yield Patrol. It comes as a software that comes with Soil Scan, and you'll know exactly where you probed. So if you went out at V8 and probed your field, you waited 2-3 weeks, you could go back to the exact same spot and probe again, and you say, is Mike adding to it, or did Mother Nature take it down? Am I going up or down? Is my corn about to have a bad day, or is it having a really good day? So these are simple things. Maybe somewhat complicated as we talk about it, but this becomes simple things. The soil scan has in it a nitrogen calculator. It's a simple device that Tim and Ron worked really hard on, and they're basically saying, you went out there and took a 12-inch core, your yield goal is 220 bushel, it checked at 4 ppm of nitrates. In other words, it's saying it's on E. It still doesn't show it, but you realize where the roots are working down there in that 12-inch zone, you're getting low, and you're saying your corn's at V12. It does some simple math at your organic matter, and it says, go to your agronomist and confirm this, but we believe you need about 110 units of N to finish the race. Because at this stage, at V12, what do? This isn't anymore about rows around. Now we're talking rows long. And coming off this tip, these guys are gold to you. 6 bushel per kernel in length. And so if we run the tank empty later in the season and these new genetics that are really ready to work for you, and we run it out right then, and we start to blow off tips. I asked the guys here from Delaware and Maryland last night where Dave Hewlett's corn is. They said, well, he puts nitrogen on 5 times through the season. 3 or 4 of those times is at late in, but he said his corn's about 46 long. Well, it has to be for 532. I mean, it's not going to be 40 around, for crying out loud. And he's got some heavy populations. He's planting 54,000 in a 30-inch row. And that makes my belly hurt a little bit, but obviously he's got it figured out. I don't think he has to call Greg. So this is an aid to help you. And so we look here at this grower, and he's coming through this corn, and this is V10 corn, and so he's in here just at the right time. He's used soil scan. But as we watch his field, did he do it right or wrong? You can see he's on the money, don't you? You see no stress anywhere in this field. He's in here probably putting on close to what? Another 80 to 110 units, and he's going to finish the race. So this corn at this time is very, very happy. He put his base rate on. He's taken it up to this point. He's now in here, and he says, I'm in a good spot. If we went underneath this canopy, this is what we'd see. A wide drop unit, and it's doing what? It's positioning nitrogen at the right time and at the right place, and it's going to be the answer to where you and I say, now we're in control. And you can see it here. We've slowed this down, and you can see the liquid coming out right next to the crown, right next to the stem there. And the reason is for this right here. This is how that plant's created. It's got all this root system. And as you watch here, where we're positioning nitrogen at this stage, right on top here, it's going to migrate down. And there's one thing I learned this year. I never think it was possible. We learned that in 48 hours, we can take a field from yellow to green. We can flash corn with sprayers and wide drop in 48 hours. We can turn it around. I didn't think it was possible. For years, if we've ever had situations where we had to use an airplane in urea, and we did this year, and we were doing it in plots, 14 days from an application of urea to go from yellow to green. What happens in that 14 days? There's a cost. And you're going to see it in some of the data I show you. You're going to see the tips where they disappeared. And 5 kernels off the tip of that ear is 30 bushel. And so as managers, you and I got to be on our game, and we got to make sure. But you say, well, wait a minute, Greg. What if it doesn't rain? And we're going to show you a lot of data in states. We got, 11 states of data? This here is 3/100ths of an inch. This is a rain after you wash your pickup. It just rains enough on the hood to spot it. You wouldn't have to run the wipers. We went out in the field, and look at this. 3/100ths, and you can see all that rain run down that stalk, the leaves collected, and it made what we call stem water. This here over here is right next to the office over here in Morton. Driving in that morning, it was super foggy. I mean, crazy foggy. Drove slow, got the office, grabbed the camera, went across the field in the cornfield, and look at the amount of moisture we got from a fog. And so by positioning nitrogen in these strips, we're going to give these plants every chance to respond. And in the end, we're going to produce more yield because we're going to put on more kernels. And it's going to be in the length of that ear. And so this is a study out of Iowa. Soybean board was looking at some, and they said, we're going to come in this case, it was anhydrous, in the spring, and they put it right down the dead center of the row. They come in and side dressed it, and they put on 150 pounds. You can see it here. And 5 weeks later, they went out, and they said, let's test. Here's a corn plant at 0 inches. Here's a corn plant at 30 inches. And in 5 weeks, they tested, and these are parts per million of nitrates. And you can see the spike here in the center. Nitrogen has converted, but it has not moved. And so if the plant root is right here, it's still looking at 2 parts per million of nitrates. And so you look at this. I wanted to show this to you because we're going to show you some trial data where we compared wide drop to colders. And you say, well, really, how could there be a response? It's right what we're looking at here. Nitrogen stayed in the center of the row, and it didn't move. So we can see it sitting right here beside us. We're going to be offering wide drop for colder bars. We realize that we can come in and go at a taller, rate of corn. You can take a side dress bar like this through V6, V7 corn, and with your tractor push it over pretty easy. And you can get yourself further down the window and let nature beat on you. It's got to have a breakaway in it, so you can play from here. You'll see the same thing over here in sprayers. A heavy magnet here, so if you hit something, the riser's going to pull back. You go through the ditch, and it's going to jump forward. And so it's just giving you the capability to go into tall corn and to manage it correctly. And once again, put replacement counts. Excuse my voice. So let's take a look at some data. Once again, this is AgriGo Liquid. And they went out at V5 with a side dress bar of colders. And then they went in of wide drop at the exact same day. And they showed some pretty dramatic increases. I think, if I don't misquote it, Ron can correct me, I think nationwide of all of our data, wide drop versus colder, we're between 8 and 9 bushel. This is aggressive. And another spot where they went in, you can see here, it wasn't as much. It's 2.75. And so where they did surface dribble down the center of the row, the same amount of liquid with a colder, what they show there, about 3.1 bushel. And then they put wide drop or we position it right next to the stalk, and we gained another 2 3/4. And so it's all about timing and positioning. You'll hear Jim Hedges say this. He'll say, it's a generational shift. Jim, my marketing manager or sales manager, farms, very good farmer. He'll speak here a little later, late tonight, but he would say, Greg, what we're learning by managing nitrogen is equal to when rootworm corn technology first come into seed. And I'm starting to agree with it. And it's things that we're going to show you. Let's talk about the base plus system. So this, he's out here. He's going to put on the base. I've told you if this was a corn on corn, I'd probably be in that 110 to 125 because you got what? You got the carbon load. All the Michigan growers were talking about last night that were here. And Mike Mullins, and they were saying, we struggle. After we harvest, we chisel plow, we plant corn into that, and we can't manage it. When it comes spring and it warms up, all Mike does is strips the break down all that residue that's on top, uses all our available nitrogen. What should we do? And we talked about row cleaners, and we talked about how you're going to manage that. And so we have to put enough on to feed Mike and the critters and still keep our corn in a good state. So the base plus is where we start. At the same time, we're a nitrogen company. We don't care which form you work with. When you start to take UAVs and you fly above these fields, if you were an agronomist walking in here, you would not be able to pick up from knife to knife the variance that this anhydrous applicator was putting in here. But you can see it here, can't you? You see these yellow strips and you realize this corn is struggling. This field has all of its N on. And it's a ways yet from pollination. You're probably going to see at least 40 bushel from row to row in those pockets. And so our team said, look, we need to help all growers. Let's work on anhydrous bars like we used to do with planters. Let's shine the bright light on them and say, start to pick them apart and say, why do we want to have a 30% difference from this knife to this knife? Because it's going to set this field on edge. And it's going to hurt the overall yield of it. And so we went out and we worked with a company and we purchased this technology called EqualFlow. And very simply, it's this. The way this system is designed, it's a high-pressure system. It keeps all the anhydrous in liquid. And so now we can push liquid through the lines instead of having vapor and liquid. And all of a sudden, we create a very even distribution of nitrogen. And so the secret is how the technology is designed with a pump here. And so all these hoses here that you see, we're pushing it through, and no longer are you going to get that knife-to-knife variance. As we look at anhydrous systems, you know, the frozen knife, all balled up here, this will make your heart hurt. This is a real pain in the neck. And so Tim and his team said, look, there's some answers to this. We got a new knife called a warm knife, and simply you'll see it back here on the little 6-row machine. Technology is this. There's a rubber, you know, we got a plastic hose in here that comes through a hollow cavity, and it keeps this knife warm so that you no longer have moist soil sticking to it. You can see it over here on the right side. You can see right here that it's got an ability for a couple knives per machine to put your vapor through. So as you have bleed off vapor off your cooling system, you can come here. The vapor is designed in here. We got them laying over here, cut open. And you can see we got a larger cavity around the plastic tube, and the vapor can come right down. We redesigned the foot here, so as the liquid comes out here, it hits a sharp point, no longer a flat, so it doesn't just blow all this material right back out and you start to gas material back out into the environment. But you notice that we put an orifice at the knife, and that's the key. Because if we're a true liquid system, and you remember in your anhydrous systems that you use from your local ag retailer, if you get that machine after somebody else had it and they cut some hoses to repair them and they didn't tell anybody and the hoses are a different length, guess what? You don't have on 150 pounds on every 30 inches. So hose length is extremely critical on anhydrous bars all over the country. We said, let's get rid of that. And with the orifice right here, with an EqualFlow putting liquid here, it doesn't matter whether your hose is 6 inches long or 276 inches long, it's going to put out the exact same amount of liquid in. And so these are the things that we're attacking. So this is just a start. We're shining a bright light into this system, and we'll start to show you things that we're going to take a look at. Let's talk about, though, what we do in our operation. So we're going to come in here in the spring in a weed and feed. And we're going to come in, and we're going to put some down of chemical, a grass. We'll have a grass herbicide. And so I'm going to put down about 35 pounds of 32%. About to fall off the backstage here. 32%. And so we're going to put some down to get the whole system started pre-plant. And so we'll float that on. We'll then come back, and we're going to make the planter work a little harder than we have in the past. For the last couple years, we're carrying 1,000 gallon of liquid up here on the tractor. So with the tractor, we got 2 fast tanks in here. You can see here we're pumping 32% through. It's carrying up right up the bar. We're filling these tanks. This is starter in this tank. And we're going to put on nitrogen on the back of the planter. Because we realize if we band it, we can almost double its effect over broadcast. So if I put on 30 to 40 units there in a band, it equals 80 units of broadcast. Talking about the old dollar bills again. Are we going to throw them all down at once? Or are we going to start to get smart? And you say, well, man, Greg, you mean Jan's going to have to manage, he's going to manage starter, he's got liquid insecticide, he's got nitrogen here, and we're using the Gen 2. And so if we position that, the Gen 2s from Shafford, and so if you look at it, let's just draw it out here. Here's your seed. We're putting that liquid 2 inches below the seed and 2 inches over to the side. So I probably drew a little close. It's probably about right here. And so immediately as the seed starts to grow, we're going to intercept that. Remember, roots go down at a 35-degree angle. And so they're going to intersect that band, and we're off to the races. So at this stage, in this cornfield, we upped it up here a little bit. This would have a little bit higher pre-plant with the. So we're sitting here. This is corn on corn. We're sitting here at about 110 pounds. If this is corn on beans, we'd be sitting at 80 pounds. And now we're going to wait. And we're going to say, well, next thing we're going to do is we're going to go out and we're going to probe a 12-inch core. And we're going to say, where are we at today? What's this plant thinking? Is it in a panic mode or is it in a good spot? And so we know we got enough on to take us almost to V12. So at V8, corn is about up to here, we're probing. And we're saying, what if? And we don't have to do a lot of fields. If you're in a field, I would just do this. Because it's not fun to walk through corn that's head high, I understand it. And so if this was my 80 acres, I would quickly identify my high loss areas, my low loss areas. And so if I have a soil type that runs through here, kind of like this, and it gets a lot of water, and I realize I'm in a high loss area, I would come in here and probe maybe twice. I'm not going to walk away the back of the field. This is the same soil type. Let's say this is a 36B, this is a 36B, and this is a 43, Ipavia. I'm going to come in here and pull a couple spots here, and those 4 probes, I'm going to measure, and I'm going to let it tell me exactly where we're at. And then if it's, let's say it's 17 parts per million, I got a little bit of time. Next week, I'll wait 8-10 days. I'll come back in and I'll probe again. And we'll just continue to watch it. And all of a sudden, we're going to see we're down to what? 7 parts per million. We're going to come in, and we're going to bring the applicator in. And at this stage, this here is at V8, approaching V10. This here, if you were walking in, it'd be up to your shoulder. And now you're going to be in here, and you're going to be applying. And you say, okay, so you guys been working on this. Does it pay? And so this is 560 trials across 11 states, including some third-party data. And this is dry farms, extremely wet farms. Across the board, all thrown into one, we ended up with 13.8 bushel response to taking nitrogen and moving it later in than if you just went out, say, at a V5 system. And so we're excited to show you some of the things that we've learned. Over in Grant County, Indiana, I looked this grower's area up, and I wanted to see what kind of rainfall he had. Because I looked at this, and I said, wow, he's got a pretty good, move this over a little bit. I feel for you guys in the front, you probably can't see past it, can you? You could shout at me or something. So you can see the difference here. So the 360 programs over here on the left side, normal side, I told Tim, just looking at it, I said, I wonder what his rainfall was. I wonder if we're looking at rain damage here. Because he went out at baby corn, V3, and he goes in with an anhydrous applicator, and he put on 200 pounds is his normal program across the board. So this gentleman, he plants it all. As soon as he gets the corn plant, he turns around and gets all the corn and beans planted, he turns around and immediately starts to side dress anhydrous. And you can see that there's going to be a response difference here. And we looked at his rainfall, and he had exactly 12.1 inches from planting to harvest. Ideal, perfect conditions. Never had more than an inch of rain the whole summer. Most of those months he had 3.4 inches. I looked at it compared to ours. We had 21 inches from planting to harvest. And so we ended up with 9 inches more than he did. So he had ideal conditions. So he came into the 360 program. He put on a base of 125 at V3 of anhydrous. He came back at V10 using soil scan. He dropped his nitrogen to 185 versus 200. So he just handed himself another $8, $7.50 at 50 cents a unit, 15 pounds, $7.50, and he picked up an unbelievable amount of yield. And when you look at this overlay here, you can see it, can't you? And you can see where it come from. So this is kitchen cabinets, guys. I mean, this is stripping the kitchen out at 170 an acre. I mean, even at 500 acres of corn, that's a significant amount of pocket change. And so hats off to this grower. His comment was, next year, we're changing the whole farm over to a V10 application. My only warning to him is, let's make sure we just don't put it in concrete. We need to be out there V7, V10, and make sure if nature's been pounding on him. Because last year he had ideal conditions. This farm here in Cheban's, Illinois. And Donnie went out, and he did his normal program where he come in with a colder. And so it says here at V4, he did a colder application, so he had 90 pounds on pre-plant. He come back with 110 at V4, pretty young corn, a long time to go yet. Then he came back at VT with Y drop. So he came back right at tassel, right before tassel. And you can see he put on 80 pounds there, and pretty remarkable. 31 bushels. And then he said, let's just for grins make an extra round in here. And he doubled up the colder and the Y drop on the same pass, one round. 280 bushels of N. I mean, it's a boatload. And he gained another 19 bushel. At the same time, I can tell you he didn't pay for it. That kind of end load would not be my normal program. Very, very satisfied with the response that he got. And so let me show you where it came from. This is an Ontario Canadian study from Pioneer, and they went to 9 different farms. And they come in and said, we're going to just let the grower do his normal program, but we're going to come back in with Y drop at V10 and put on 50 more pounds just for grins and see what happens. Now, you and I don't know what the standard rate was, unless there's anybody here in the crowd from Canada tonight that knows this particular study and grower. I can just tell you by walking through the field here in this photo with him. I see several things that bother me, but we'll ignore these. I look at this and I'm like, wow. I don't know what he's thinking or she is thinking. I mean, do they just say, well, stinks to be me. It's been a tough year, Greg. I mean, what do you want me to do? You know, I went to the bank and they said our line of credit's done. I don't know. But I can tell you by looking from this and this to over here, there's going to be a difference, and there was. And you can see where it comes from. It's not a mystery. There's no magic. It comes right off the tip, the length of that ear. And you can see it here. It's pretty amazing what 50 more pounds, $25 did here in this study where they put 17 and a half bushels on. And so this is a difference between trading pickups or trading combines or renting the farm for another year. And so I'm going to show you a picture here of these two guys. I don't know them. Tim and I just picked it up off of Google, but I like this picture a lot. I don't know this for sure, but this is a father-son team. What I like about these guys, they like each other. Look at the fun they're having there. Look at the son. So his wife's name's Mary. And he probably has a boy and a girl, maybe about 1.5 to 3 years old. He come out of college, and he told Mary, I really want to farm. And being a good gal, she said, let's go for it. And they moved in, and they're working at it. But I'll guarantee you at breakfast, there had been more than one conversation. She says, are you sure we're doing the right thing by farming? Because it is hard. And I'm sure you have friends that you were in college with that could possibly be making more than you are this year. But at the same time, how do you put a price on these two's relationship and the dreams he has of growing Dad's farm with him? So Jim and I have designed a program. We said, let's work with these father-son teams, and let's teach them. If they would go out and buy a used, fill in the blank, Rogator, Case, Deere, Hagee, Miller, I'm sure I forgot somebody, Apache, what would happen if they bought a used sprayer and they put Y-Drop on their 1,500 acres of corn, and then he turned around and did another 5,000 acres at anywhere between $10 to $12 an acre, and all of a sudden, John is bringing in for his dad, not only did they raise their farm's yield, but they brought cash in. And so tremendous opportunity. So if you're sitting in this audience and you're 25 to 35 years of age and you got a little bit of energy in you, and you do, because that's what you do, you have a golden opportunity, and we're going to be building a website to help you. And we're going to put you on that website locator. And so when growers that are in this crowd right here that are within 30 miles, you say, I want a Y-Drop, but I don't have a sprayer, they're going to look you up and say, John and Mary Smith have one. I think I'll give John a call. And all of a sudden, we start to crank this whole thing and change the whole tune of it. So let's take a quick look about 360. And you can see the whole circle here of how we think. We're in nitrogen management, and it starts with the combine. As you could tell here right behind me, we've jumped into tillage. And then we're all about plant health and feeding that crop to be the absolute best it can be for that farm this year. And so let's talk about where we're at. I look at this picture, I can remember it vividly. That's Andy there running beside me in the cart. Aaron's ahead of me. He's going a little too slow, so we're slowing up to keep, back behind him. But this is what we do. This is what it's about. It never gets more fun than this. When you have your son beside you, catching you, and that day's changing fast. He's telling me he's not going to start to run the combine. I'm not going to run the cart. Brad, we're buying another combine. I refuse to run the cart. Dad shouldn't have to run the cart yet. Maybe later on I will. But right now, I'm going to stay in the combine. But I wanted to show you this picture because what you're looking at here, and we talk about laying hundreds of dollars on the table, you're looking at $100 right here. And let's talk about it. How do we get this back? Because if there's money there, then by golly, I need it, and I want it if I'm going to continue to grow my operation. If we're going to continue to put kids in college, and we're going to continue to buy more fertilizer, whatever it is that we're doing. And so we said, look, it takes 5 years. I wish I had a corn plant up here, John. Too bad we're not doing this tomorrow night. I'd have one. I screwed up. But if I had a corn plant here, do you realize it takes Mike 5 years to get through the buffet, to totally strip it out like that pan of wings was. It was bone empty. And that's how long it takes Mike to take that corn plant down to convert it to cash to you. And the way I think, I'm always wanting to speed things up. I'm thinking, well, what if we could design some simple technology to do that in 3 years instead of 5 years? That means I have more pocket change, and I have to buy less from Mark at Sun Ag. And so this technology is called chain roll. Very simply, it's this. We said, can we design something as we harvest that helps Mike out, where every inch or so we fracture and chain this residue, then we chop it into 6-inch pieces to 11-inch pieces, where we can handle it with the row cleaners, but we open all this up so that Mike and his team can immediately, because Mike can't go in through the side rind there. He can only come in from the ends. And so our goal was all along, can we fracture this and open it up and create a speed? And you can see it here. And you can see what I'm holding here is cash. And so now all of a sudden our microbials, if we're going to work this in, we're going to start to take the N, P, and K and sulfur right out of here. And you can see the list here of a 200 bushel. And for all you guys in here, I was talking to you earlier, many of you, talking to Charlie from Wisconsin, 221 bushel on corn strip tilled, I think he said 8 to 9 years. Amazing. But look at the dollars that he has. 90 pounds of N, 32 pounds of P, 220 pounds of potash, 14 pounds of sulfur. You start adding that up, cha-ching, 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 and now you start to see why we're saying you need to go in and manage residue. At the same time, realizing if we chop it super fine, be careful, we don't want you to back any plants up. Because what? This is worth 7 bushel to you. Every plant should put on an ear. Every plant that has an ear is 7 bushel per 1,000. I don't know what it would be. Anybody got a phone? Divide out 532 bushel by 54. What is that? Somebody help me out. I don't do math in my head in front of this many people. 9.9. Dave Hewlett in Maryland, he's been up to 11 bushel per 1,000. Here, I get to 7.2. He's 9.9. Probably using a flex ear. Probably never having a bad day. And she's just, I guarantee it's not determinate. It couldn't be at that 9.9. But it's an interesting thought, isn't it? So if we lose this guy, it's just a hole. And it's one of those things. How we think at 360 is, we're working with combines. I've watched this for years. So I'm really kind of glad I'm not in planters anymore so I can play with these things because these drives me nuts. This is cash. And I look underneath the corn head here. You can see the combine hasn't run by here yet. This is under the corn head. And you see all these kernels. And now I said, why? Why do we accept that? You know, we got the deck plates opened up and there's kernels coming down through there. And I look at that and I say, well, why wouldn't we just do something as yield saver belts and we just close this up so that we harvest and capture every bit of it? And you can see it here. This half of the screen is an OEM. This is an Iowa. This half has got yield saver. And look at the difference in kernels bouncing around. And you're going to get some of these guys. You know, I'm not going to be so naive to say that guy didn't bounce into here. But this makes me almost sick when I watch this. And you realize the kind of loss that we're accepting there. And this is mild. This is over in Bloomington at John's and Paul's farm. And when we went, we marked off 25 foot a row, 2 rows. And over here on the OEM side, 12 row heads, 6 and 6, 71 kernels. Over here, 5. What's that make difference? In our research this year, it's between 1.5 bushel and 8 bushel savings. I'm going to say we'll probably average about 3 to 4. $4 corn, I can do that in my head. $4 corn at 4 is $16 an acre. I'll take it. I'll put that on my stack down here of cool things where I can start to be more into farming and more detailed. And so those are things that we face. To finish up here, I want to talk about this. You've all seen this. You've been to proving grounds, and you've seen us dig pits, and we've talked about roots. And you've heard me say, and you probably don't believe me, that a corn plant, each one, puts on 3,000 miles of root, each plant. Amazing factory. Pulling nutrients and water up. Remember how deep roots go. Deep as corn is tall. You got 12-foot high corn at home, you got roots 12 feet deep, unless you've done something kind of crazy in there where you stop them. And that could be a spring pass with tillage. It could be maybe something you did in a fall pass. But at the same time, you look at this and you say, these guys are working hard for us. And so let's talk a little bit about rippers. And you can see here the 870 has been a popular ripper all across the country. And as farmers, we look at what's on top. And I've watched this for years. And we would tell you that you want to let it lay very level behind this ripper. And you can see we've got the disc in here. This is a corn-on-corn field. Precision sits right here. So we farm all this ground around it. And you can see that we've let it lay level. So we get an A for the day. If that was a hill valley, if you leave behind your chisel plow this kind of environment, where we got 6-inch divots, if we laid a straight edge across. First thing you're going to have to do is come in and do some type of tillage to level this up. And so for years we've said, let's get it laid level. What's the next thing that's going to happen here? About March 30th, I'm going to put 28 in chemical on. And if it's fit, we'll blow a vertical tillage harrow across the top of that at about 12 to 13 mile an hour. And now we're prepped to plant, and we will stale bed seed that in. And we'll come in there, we'll work our 28 and herbicide in, and we're ready to go. But we've watched for years on top or underneath. I watch this with interest. And you've all seen pits dug. And we accept this. And we just say, well, what are you going to do? This is a 7-inch tiger point from Case. What do you expect? It pulls hard anyhow. Doggone it. I mean, you couldn't afford. And all that conversation that goes on. But the way I think like a corn plant. And I'm saying, well, okay, we got 5 inches of fluff here for a lot of residue. Good thing. You can see we've used the chain roll on. This is all ready to go. Mike's working here. But I realize that there's N, P, and K and sulfur in here that I want to get into, and the roots are going to go down, and they're going to grow right around it. I'm like, why wouldn't we want to play in the whole environment? Because if you look at a root and how it spreads out, roots go far sideways as leaves go sideways. Why wouldn't we want to open up this whole bank account with this corn plant to get its roots into? And so when I see this, for years I've said, we ought to do something about this. Well, this year we jumped in, and we said, you know what? We're going to design a bullet point that's 14 inches wide, and the trick's going to be to design it such that it doesn't pull any harder than anything else that's out there. Kind of a broad statement, don't you think? And so we went out, and we started. We made them 18 inches to start with, put her in the ground, and she went, oh, stop before we break something. And so we said, all right, there's got to be a design. So Tim and his team went after it. And 3 months later, they came up with what we call the bullet. And it's all in how it's designed. It's all in how it's shaped. And so let's talk about it. And the goal is to do what? To remove the hump. And so this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, if we're going to be ripping, in this case, we're ripping, struggling with my chart here a little bit tonight. So we're going to rip 12 inches deep. So we're going to come in here, and we put a shank in these spots. You realize we're going to have a hole, and then we're going to have the mound, and it's going to be like this. What are we looking for? I'm looking for a profile. For years, we would come in and do inline ripper and soybeans, and we'd be 15 inches deep. We were looking for it to be where the shank is, a little bit of a dip, come up about 1.5 inches, a little bit of a dip, come up about 1.5 inches. I'll accept that. But we've opened up a whole profile here. We got moisture coming up. Got moisture coming down. We got your nitrogen working in here. And so this is a profile where I just put my camera, my phone down actually in the pit, and you can see we got about 1.5 inches. And so we did a lot of measurements. What you see here in the foam chart, on the foam boards, is exactly real life. And so you look at it and you say, wow, this half of the ripper, you can see where we were working. This half had the brand new tiger points on it. And so we said, well, let's take it and let's look at some time trials. So we went up to Michigan. This tractor wasn't real big. And so this is a Smith farm up there. And Stephanie's family was gracious enough to work with us. The point they had on was wore out. It was a John Deere laser point. And so these are the times. This tractor is 235 horse, front wheel drive, 5-shank Deere ripper. We went in and we put on a brand new Deere point. He went to 3.5 mile an hour, and it took him 4 minutes and 9 seconds to make the one pass through the half-mile row. It took us a brand new 360 point, 4 minutes and 7 seconds. So there's 2 seconds difference. We're a touch faster. And I'm going to tell you, though, in my heart of hearts, it's going to pull a touch harder. Do you have to go to Brad and buy a brand new tractor? No. I don't believe that we have to. We're in the 12-inch range here. Went to Matt Foes in northern Illinois. Once again, a John Deere ripper. It went the other way by 12 seconds, but we're in the hunt. And you can see the point here. They was running, and we put on the bullet. Then we went here in our own farms, and we did every round we changed points. Back and forth, across the field. We were in a 75-acre field, and every pass, we were timing. Every pass, we were putting on a different set of points. This was a 7-shank ripper. And so you can see here, we were pulling up our 8360 track tractor and 7 shanks, and we were running 5.8 and 5.8. So basically, we're in the same hunt. at the end of the day, it's all about this. We started out saying we got to think like a corn plant. And so we're interested in saying, can we put on a massive chassis under the ground? And if we're going to lay money on the table, and we're going to put investment in that farm, and that's why I'm still farming that 450. I'll just tell you, I got a lot of money in that farm. Because if I farm your ground, I treat it just like my own. And I mean, I've got the pHs right, and we got the P and K levels up, and I hate to walk away from it. So that's why I'm still there. And I'm trying to make it work. And so the challenge for you and I is simply this. We got to get back to farming. And in times like this, the challenges that we face is a tremendous opportunity for us to get dramatically better. And so take heart. I'm excited that you're here. We love designing technology and representing it to you. Look for your dealers that brought you to have a soil scan capable. You can pull the probes, take those tests immediately to him, run them live instantly. Don't let them heat up on the pickup dash or warm in the seat of the pickup. But there is opportunity for you and I to become the absolute best corn growers that we can. Give you some quick dates to think about. This summer, Jenna, I remembered because I saw you. August, if I can write it here, August 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, we're going to have proving grounds, and I'm amping it up big time. I've figured out that we can kill corn and harvest it, so I'm going to dedicate about 85 acres. We're going to move the plot field from the dairy over to 155 Town Line intersection, so we're just a mile east of Precision. We own that farm there. We've got drip in there. We've got pattern tile in there. We'll be tiling in front of you. We're going to dig pits. We're going to do tillage. We're going to harvest beans and corn. I think we are anyway, because I'm going to salt the tar out of it. We'll figure out how to kill it. And that's what I told the Michigan guy last night. He was saying, well, what am I going to do? We can't harvest till October 15th. That's when we start. I said, why? Because it takes that long to get the corn ready. I said, well, do me a favor. Salt down. If it was me, I'd salt 40 acres. Salt 10 acres. And harvest on September 15th. At the proving grounds this year, we did what? We went into, it was probably about 55 to 60% corn. And we put the salt to it. So it was about 55%. In 19 days, it ended up at 18%. Test weight was 52 to 53. Yeah, nothing to brag about. I'm not going to get any brownie points for that. I realize that. But what if we would try? Because the Australian guys came to proving grounds. You know what they said? Aha! This is the answer. We tried to do 2 years of corn in 1 year, 2 crops. And we struggled to make it fit. And they looked at what we were doing of salt. We've done salt for years in the seed industry. And they pay me a little bit of premium when they salt it. Man, that'll make you cry. They come in 160 acres of beautiful corn. They salt her down. She dies almost instantly. But it'll take the moisture down in a hurry. It'll work on soybeans the same way. And so we'll play with this. So if you want to see on August 9th, you want to see corn look like it's 18%, come. And we'll have some fun. And so that's what I have for you tonight. We thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. There's got to be some extra food left, right, John? I mean, can we get it all cleaned up? Please. Yeah. And so appreciate it very much. And you're welcome to stay and talk as long as you like. And we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.